You get one block, you may not necessarily get a second. Some things about Talladega just ain't ever gonna change. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. Talladega Superspeedway always delivers drama, controversy, spectacle. I'm still trying to digest this race. I'm sure many of you are as well. Maybe we can help each other out, talk things through. We will take a look at the finishing results in a few moments. I haven't even seen them yet. We'll talk about the race winner, why this is a huge moment for NASCAR, why this race was, in fact, a huge failure for Ford. We'll also talk fuel mileage racing, that whole controversy, but I want to begin with the last lap, the last third of a lap. I also can't believe I just said nay, unironically. I want to give Michael McDowell a ton of credit. Backing up a little further, he ran a near flawless final 20 plus laps. That whole final run, you had 3 Toyotas lined up in the outside. You had actually 4 Fords on the inside, but from 3 completely different teams. You had a front row Ford out front, an RFK Ford in second, and a Stewart-Haas Ford in third. Ford winless this season. Obviously, they all wanted to see a blue oval get to victory lane today, but they're not exactly teammates. Michael McDowell worked very well with Brad Keselowski, who worked well with Noah Gragson and Josh Berry, a couple of young, inexperienced Cup Series drivers. They were able to push McDowell clear of the pack numerous times in the closing laps. He was able to almost work both lanes at once, control the race. Michael McDowell was fantastic until the tri-oval. And now I want to give some credit to Brad Keselowski because he's a 6-time Talladega winner. I know it's been a while. It's actually been 3 years since his last Cup Series win, ironically, came at Talladega. But he is so damn good at this style of racing. Sometimes he gets himself into trouble. He pushes a little too hard. He assumes everyone can handle a loose race car like he can. We've seen him spin people out, but he raced that last lap so damn smart. He pushed McDowell clear to the lead, got himself clear of third place as well, and then was able to drag back just enough to get a push from Noah Gragson so that he could go for the win himself. Brad Keselowski, the vet he is, the champion he is, timed that final run perfectly. Michael McDowell made a great first block, but the second block was just a few inches too late. Reminded me a lot, unfortunately, of the big Ryan Newman crash at the end of the 2020 Daytona 500. Got sideways, spun up in front of the pack. The big one breaks out, and Keselowski's momentum was stifled just enough that a Toyota, Tyler Reddick, was able to swoop in to steal the victory. More on Reddick in a few moments. I feel for McDowell. He led the most laps today, was in control of this race in the final 20 laps. I feel for Brad Keselowski. He did everything right, got the run at the exact right time, made the right moves. It just didn't work out, unfortunately, for either of them, and it didn't work out for Ford. This is a brutal defeat for the Blue Ovals. This wasn't a literal must-win race, but in some ways you could argue it was, at least from an emotional, a confidence standpoint. Ford has been shut out of victory lane. Their new Mustang Dark Horse is now 0 for 10, 0 for 13 if you include all the exhibition and qualifying races. The super speedways are the one type of track they seem to have an advantage over their Toyota and Chevy counterparts. They swept the stages at Atlanta, ran well at Daytona in February, were in the mix towards the end, but they failed to get to victory lane then, and today, once again, sweeping the stages, failed to pick up the ultimate prize. It's brutal, man. They can win anywhere. I mean, we've seen Ryan Blaney, Brad Keselowski, Chris Buescher, Joey Logano. They've run and finished top 5 at a variety of tracks this year. But Talladega is one of the few places they actually have an advantage over their competition. Now they'll have to wait until Daytona in August at the very end of the regular season. That brutal, man. I keep using that word. There's no better word, I think, to describe the way Ford must be feeling right now. You sweep the stages. McDowell leads the most laps. Logano leads the second most laps. You're 1-2 coming out of turn 4 to take the checkered, and a Toyota wins? This has to be some sort of cruel joke. A tough loss for sure, but hey, I hope Ford's confidence is still high. Back-to-back runner-up finishes for Brad Keselowski, and I just rattled off a bunch of stats. Ford was fast today. They don't have a super speedway problem. Now just shift your focus to, I don't know, maybe the intermediate tracks. Tough pill to swallow, and it was looking like a really tough day for Toyota up until basically the finish. There wasn't a single caution for incident today in stage 1 or stage 2, but early in stage 3, some sort of weird stack up on the back straightaway. Chase Elliott gets into Justin Haley, who hooks Christopher Bell, totals the 20 car. Christopher Bell unfortunately finishes dead last, but the remaining Toyotas, with about 40 laps to go, made a very interesting strategy call, one that caught the Fords and Chevys completely off guard. With the whole lead draft heavily saving fuel, Denny Hamlin, Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick, the remaining Toyotas all chose to pit under green inside their window so that they could come off pit road, line up, and go full throttle. That move was either going to force the lead draft to start pushing harder, burning more gas, or the Toyotas were just going to keep making up 1 to 2 seconds worth of lap time and cycle way out ahead. Brilliant strategy call that again caught some of the Chevys and Fords a little off guard. Like, I think Fox played some of Kyle Busch's radio communication. You could hear Randall Burnett was like flipping through pages like, yeah, we're trying to figure out how we should counter this. Brilliant play by the Toyotas. Looked like everything was going to work out in the end when suddenly, in all my years of watching NASCAR at Talladega, I've never seen a team implode quite like this. Obviously, they're all pushing as hard as they can, trying to make the fastest lap time. Some sort of weird stack up here. You got Nemechek into the back of Bubba, who's into the back of Jones. Oh, they get hooked hard into the outside wall. Brutal impact. Jones, thankfully, got out of his race car, was checked and released from the infield care center. Did say that his back was a bit sore, but initially over the radio, it sounded a lot worse. Thankfully, none of these drivers were seriously injured, it appears, but goodness gracious, what happened? Even the broadcast booth was stunned. Everything was quite literally lined up perfectly for Toyota, and it just imploded spectacularly. Even Denny Hamlin coming out of the infield care center was about as speechless as I think I've ever seen him. He didn't know how to explain it. It just went wrong. The first 4 cars, I think, to DNF today were all Toyotas. That doesn't happen usually. Great strategy gone horribly wrong, except not exactly. The strategy worked for the remaining Toyota cars, because with that caution, the lead draft all pit to top off on gas. Truex, Reddick, Ty Gibbs stayed out and were able to lead the outside lane on the restart with 20-something laps to go. They got their track position and had 3 effectively teammates lined up front. I gave Michael McDowell and the Fords a ton of credit for how they worked together on the inside lane, McDowell controlling both lanes. I want to give Tyler Reddick and Martin Truex Jr. especially some credit, because even Clint Boyer in the Fox booth noticed that the Toyotas couldn't seem to push each other as comfortably as the Fords. Like, Reddick would get a little more wiggly than we ever saw Brad or McDowell get. Again, the Fords, really great at this style of racing. You could tell the Toyota was kind of a fish out of water. It was a little sketchier. So the fact that Reddick was able to hang out there first, second, third for the entire final run, they executed. They did very well and kept themselves in position when all hell broke loose coming out of turn 4. Tyler Reddick squeaks through the smoke to get the victory. His first win of the season, the first win of the year for 23XI Racing, the first win for 23XI with boss Michael Jordan there in attendance. The images after the race were fantastic. Michael Jordan, arguably the greatest American athlete of all time, celebrating with Tyler Reddick's family. They cut to victory lane a little later on. Bubba Wallace was there with them. Denny Hamlin, now in 23XI gear, was there to celebrate and congratulate Reddick. Michael Jordan doing interviews with Fox afterwards. Fantastic stuff. This is the kind of stuff that does transcend NASCAR. It's so great to see Michael Jordan at the racetrack, as influential as he still is today. A great moment for NASCAR and a great moment for 23XI. Congratulations to Tyler Reddick. Again, the strategy worked out for him, and then he and Truex worked well together that whole final run, and he was in the right place at the right time. Dodged the crash, was pumped up afterwards. Loved seeing Reddick climb the fence, celebrate with the crowd. Love that kind of stuff. Great energy. Reddick's been close a few times this year. Was second to Larson at Las Vegas. Might have had the fastest long run car at Texas last week, but the end of the race didn't fall in his favor. Now he breaks through and gets the win. Remember, Tyler Reddick also won his dual race at Daytona back in February. So I don't know, maybe low-key kind of an underrated super speedway racer. I'm probably just reaching. Those are the only 2 races that even come to mind. But a big deal for Tyler Reddick and a big deal for Toyota to salvage what was otherwise a catastrophic catastrophic day. Toyota now has 4 wins on the year. They're trying to catch up to Chevy's 6. Remember, 5 wins have been Hendrick. Suarez for Trackhouse got that 1 win. Gibbs has 3. And now 23XI, just the 4th different organization to win a race this year. Huge shot in the arm for that group for sure. Congratulations to Tyler Reddick, 23XI Racing. They stole one from Ford right there in the home stretch. Let's see where some guys ended up now. I knew Keselowski got 2nd. Hey, Noah Gragson, 3rd. Good for him. He was up near the front. He and his SHR teammate Josh Berry in very similar paint schemes seemed to work well together. Great finish for Gragson. That's exciting. Is that his first career top 5? Let me check the stat sheet. Nope, I'm mistaken. He scored a top 5 for Beard Motorsports in the summer Daytona race 2 years ago. Forgot all about that. First top 5 as a full-time Cup Series driver, at least. How did Ricky Stenhouse Jr. get a top 5? I don't know that I saw him all day. Hey, congratulations. Alex Bowman, much-needed top 5. Oh, hey, and speaking of Beard Motorsports, Anthony Alfredo gets 6th. And a top 5 in the Xfinity race yesterday. What a weekend for Fast Pasta. Glad to see Todd Gilliland get himself a top 10. Is this his first top 10 of the year? Gosh, I'm just going to keep checking stats. Yeah, first top 10 of the year for Todd Gilliland. See, I knew he led a ton of laps at Daytona and Atlanta to start the year, but didn't get the finishes I felt he deserved. Another good race for him tonight. Front row cars were quick. Finally, a deserving finish for Todd. Daniel Hemrick led some laps tonight, and Harrison Burton gets himself a top 10. Man, a lot of drivers here in these top 5, top 10 spots that really needed good runs, got some attention today. Good for them. Just off this page, unofficially, Carson Hocevar 17th, Corey LaJoie 18th. LaJoie finished this race on his side, skidding along the driver's side door. Wow, that is about as Talladega as it gets, if you ask me. 19th for Logano, 20th for Blaney, a couple of the heavy favorites coming in. Logano, like I mentioned, led a ton of laps. Shouldn't say a ton. Nobody really led a ton of laps. I think Logano led about 20 or 22 laps. I think like more than half the field led at some point today. So honestly, it was weird if you didn't lead laps. So nobody really led a ton. It was a lot of drivers just leading laps here and there. Want to give a quick shout out as well to BJ McLeod. He finishes outside the top 30, ran out of fuel in stage 1, unfortunately, and fell out of cycle. But early in this race, he started 37th in an unsponsored open entry, drove his way to the lead, led a lap today. He did that in 10 laps. I know a lot of folks were saving fuel. I get it. But BJ McLeod, we got a taste of what he can do in the Daytona duels this past winter. Almost had a full course meal today. I was believing BJ McLeod for a bit. It was a real shame his run sort of ended prematurely. Gosh, I just looked at the results. Michael McDowell gets a 31st place finish today. I didn't realize. This is like Chastain last week getting a 32nd despite being second on the last lap. Like wow, that's hard to stomach. Did not deserve a 31st place finish. That second block was late. You would have thought he would have seen enough blocks go bad over the years to not make that move, but dang, doesn't mean the guy deserved a 31st place result. Brutal. Hate that for McDowell, man. One more quick shout out here while I'm just giving him out. Austin Cindric. I've been hard on him lately. I think deservedly so. He hasn't done much outside of the super speedways, but to his credit, he continues to shine at super speedways. He collected 19 stage points today, finished 1st and 2nd. That's extremely impressive. He's kind of on the edge of the playoff bubble, around 20th in points. Hopefully he can move his way forward as the year goes on. But there we go. Some of the top finishers, some of the top storylines here today at Talladega. Now, we all as fans must ask ourselves a very important question. What style of racing do we want to see at super speedways? Because I don't know about the rest of y'all, but me, I'll take 2 and 3 wide fuel mileage racing over single file freight train wall ride racing any day of the week. Was the fuel saving excessive at times today? Yes, I'll admit that. I didn't like them running 4 to 5 seconds slower laps than what's possible. I'll admit that was a little ridiculous, but I'm going to repeat something I said after the Daytona 500 this year. So much about super speedway racing is out of the driver's control. Fuel mileage racing is something the drivers and teams very much can control. I don't have an issue with teams spending the first 20, 30 laps of a run, trying to play that game. Because then once they pit the next 20, 30 laps of the stage, they're racing hard. And now they might have track position depending on how well they played the strategy. Again, something they can control. And now with stage racing, there's something to race for 60 laps in. There's something to race for 120 laps in. Back in the day, there was nothing to race for 40, 50, 60 laps into a race. And even now, lap 15, lap 20, It would be dumb for a driver to make a bold 4-wide move or a big block. The pay window is far from open. We would criticize a driver for being too bold too early. So that's why I'm pleading with fans to just be realistic. No, you're not going to see 2 and 3 wide racing jostling for position for 188 laps. That's just not going to happen. The reward is not worth the risk, and it never has been in the history of plate racing at Talladega. That's the dirty little secret, although it's never really been a secret. I don't know why so many fans seemed shocked today that guys aren't going for it on lap 20. Like, they never have in the history of this sport. If NASCAR wants to tweak the lengths of stages, perhaps, maybe drop stage yellows entirely from super speedway races, perhaps that could break up some of the uber aggressive fuel mileage racing. I'd be fine with that. But again, if you're asking me to choose between single file racing just to pass the time versus pack fuel mileage racing that puts strategy into the hands of the drivers, I'm going to pick this one every single time. I feel like this fuel mileage debate is actually clouding the real problem. And now I'm guilty of this as well because I just spent, 5 minutes ranting about it. The real problem is the next gen car. I know, surprise, surprise. This car cannot race 3 wide at full speed at super speedways, not for significant stretches of time at least. We saw at the end of this race, some guys at the back were trying to get a third lane to work. For brief stretches, they were able to pull that line forward. SVG was making a move. But then Ty Gibbs jumped up there and he wasn't quite up to full speed and that third lane dissolved instantly. When nobody's saving fuel, it is nearly impossible to get that third lane going and bring it to the front. I'm pretty sure that's what Kyle Busch is alluding to here with this post he made just after the race today. So that's the real problem here. You're not going to see 3 and 4 wide racing at Talladega unless guys are saving fuel. More changes likely need to be made to the next gen car. I don't know what those changes should be. Unlike the short tracks and road courses, this might very well be an aero issue. Probably is an aero issue. I don't know what the right move should be, but it is a problem that is being masked by the fuel mileage racing and discussion. So we could go on, ramble for hours on end, probably not get anywhere. I've got better things to do. You've got better things to do. Like putting this race on the Groovy Gauge. Woo! The Groovy Gauge is powered by my friends at Electric E-Bikes. Head to electricebikes.com, link in the description below to learn even more. While everyone on my X timeline was complaining about fuel mileage racing, my biggest issue was with Fox. They did a lot of things well today, but the big problem was the commercials and the commercial placement. I get that this is Talladega, a huge draw on big Fox. This isn't a cable channel. This broadcast is paid for by advertisers. I get the abundance of commercials, but the timing. They went to a full screen commercial break with like 5 laps to go in stage 2. That's unacceptable. I understand that Fox often front loads the commercials so that the last 20 laps of today's race went commercial free. That's good. That's smart. We want the end of the race to be largely uninterrupted, but that leads to so many huge interruptions early on. And now with stage racing and strategy, there's too much action early in the race. Yeah, 20 years ago, lap 72 didn't matter. Now it does. 5 laps to go in stage 2, that matters. We can't go to commercial now. Certainly not a full screen ad. Again, overall, the Fox broadcast was fine today. The sound mixing is still weird. I can hear Mike Joy breathing constantly. The cars, the crowd are too quiet. His mic or their mics are a little too hot. I don't know where the balancing is going wrong. I got a few little nitpicks here and there. The big problem was the commercials. I hate to sound like a broken record. You already know my take. Viewing habits have changed so much in the past 5 years, let alone 20 years. Audiences are not conditioned to sit through commercials like they were when Fox first signed that NASCAR contract in the 2000s. Audiences have evolved. I think NASCAR's TV coverage needs to evolve with it. Fox hasn't done that, at least when it comes to integrating commercials and advertisers. And it's frustrating to watch sometimes. I totally get it. Oh, sorry, back to the Groovy Gauge. I'm all over the place. There's so much to cover in this race. What I was gonna say was I felt this race had a good flow to it, wasn't bogged down by a bunch of cautions early or late. The caveat was that the Fox interruptions messed with that flow, and watching this race from home, it did impact my viewing experience negatively. But if I focus on the on-track racing, this was a great race. I wasn't nearly as offended by the fuel mileage racing as many others were. It made the two opening stages more interesting, in my opinion. I'm going to give this race an 85% on the Groovy Gauge. Hate to see a bunch of cars get torn up at the end, but at least we didn't have to re-rack them and stack them time after time. Overtime 1, overtime 2. We got it all out of the way at once, like ripping a Band-Aid off. Got a little spectacle in there at the end. Crowd got to see some cars spin out and crash. Maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to say, but fans root for some crashes if they go see a Talladega race. At least the vast majority do. Let's be completely honest. So you got some spectacle at the end. I thought it was a good race. Thought it was fun. Lots to talk about, clearly. Let's wrap things up. Let me know what you thought of today's Geico 500 at Talladega Superspeedway. Leave a comment down below. I always read them. And while you're down there, leave a like on this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new to the channel and you love all things NASCAR. We talk NASCAR every day, all year long. And a huge thank you to my very generous Patreon supporters. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, folks. I will see you again very, very soon. Thanks again for tuning in.